So I didn't really expect working in theatre to change the way I make films, but it did. So I began writing and directing my own plays simply because I want to produce something that I could actually control, working in small spaces with a small amount of crew in even smaller spaces and shorter time frames, all in an effort to create work that actually was meaningful and resonated with audiences. But over time, as I left theatre behind me, I began to see that my work in theatre affected everything of how I made my own independent feature films. So this video is about a few things I learned from working in theatre, producing my own plays, and why I think it quietly made me a better filmmaker. So between 2011 and 2013, I wrote, directed and produced 2 plays. So I came to theatre basically because I just moved to Dublin and I wasn't able to financially produce the longer form stories that I wanted to make at that time after college. And I was hanging out with a group of actors, and when it was proposed that we put on a play as a collective, I kind of jumped at the opportunity. I felt this would be a lot of fun, and I felt it would be kind of a stepping stone to produce the longer form work that I wanted to do without having to get bogged down by all the technology aspect of it. So the first play we put on was called Not While There's Work to Be Done. This was about a father and a son looking for a missing mule and walking across Connemara to try and find this missing mule. And the first time we put this on, it was put on in the Teachers Club, which is a small theatre in the north side of Dublin. And then the following year we put this on again, this time in Temple Bar in a theatre called the New Theatre. And this was just closer to the centre of town, easier to promote, easier to get people in, and the theatre were really supportive of us and the project. And then in 2013, we put on another play that I wrote called Feck Off Crows, and this was about 2 nuns who discover crows eating their vegetables in their back garden during the War of Independence, and when they ask a British soldier to come and shoot the crows, this draws the nuns into the conflict. And this was put on again in the New Theatre in Temple Bar.
You!
What?
You're alive!
I want to know what you know.
What? Not what, Anna. Pardon.
I want to know what you
But
know.
I know!
That's right.
What do I know?
Don't play games.
Be careful, Private, sometimes she lies.
No! Now, you listen to me. Your friends, those cowards, was it them who shot me? Everyone's seen you around together.
This is shameful stuff, Anna. So hard to believe.
That man's a menace to society, just like you were saying.
Oh, yeah, just like I was saying.
And these 2 have been in it together from the start.
Oh, that's not true. Yeah. I suspected her from the very beginning. Sure, she was sent here by a dead woman. She doesn't know the word of the Lord. Don't think she even knows her prayers. Sister, stop that!
So in theatre, performance comes first. In theatre, really, it's amazing. Performance and the acting is really everything. The performance is the music, the performance is the tone, the performance is even really the story. It's really incredible how it works. And I think this bit of education was a huge learning curve for me. So in theatre, you don't have camera tricks, editing or coverage to hide behind. And if you don't have the right actors on the project, you're going to find out very, very quickly, and you're going to feel exposed very, very quickly. Now that might sound like a disadvantage to working in theatre, but let me tell you why it isn't. So if a performance isn't working in theatre, you're going to notice it, and you can do something about it a lot earlier, a long time before an audience ever comes to see it. But with a film, there's so much going on and so many moving parts between the cameras and the lights, and I'm guilty of this myself, that a performance that's just off, not even a bad actor, just a performance that's off in tone or in terms of the rhythm, that's all I'm really talking about here, not the acting, just the tone and the rhythm, that kind of things, that you might notice it too late because it's too much of a subtle thing when you're so busy focused on all the other moving parts. And by the time it comes to the editing, it's too late to do anything about that. Now maybe you can try and cover up it with music and clever cuts. I know you're clever independent filmmakers, but even I think with all the clever cuts and music and coverage in the world, an audience will still sense when a performance is off. Now I was so lucky, every time I put on these plays I worked with some fantastic actors, but doing a play is like like the equivalent of doing a marathon for an actor. You're on stage, you're working as part of a team, you have to stay focused, you have to know when to deliver your line and when to move when you have to move. Now obviously not every actor is on stage for the hour and a half, 2 hours that the play is on. I wrote the plays, both of them, and designed them in such a way that when actors are on stage for a couple of scenes, they'll also get a scene or two off, and they'll get a reprieve from the narrative when they can go back and decompress. But even so, you're still asking a lot from all these actors, and it's a huge challenge, or it can be a huge challenge depending on the actor and the skill level they're bringing to it, to stay focused, to work as part of a team and bring something creative to that project. So yeah, producing these plays gave me such a much deeper appreciation for the craft and the art of acting, and it was definitely something I hadn't had before that, and definitely something I didn't have on my film and TV education. So doing these 3 years in theatre was almost like a second education for me in understanding the appreciation and the craft of acting. So yeah, that's supposed to be some praise for actors there. Take it, you're amazing. I love actors. Sometimes I do feel in the world of independent filmmaking there's too much emphasis on the gear, the technology, the camera and the lighting, and it takes a very talented and strong-willed and focused actor to stay focused in between the takes, and in order to get the emotional continuity later on in the film. I've tried to design my films in such a way, you know, learning from what I did in theatre, that I try to give the actors space in my films to give the best performances they can and try and keep the takes going a little bit longer. But it's still super challenging, and you know, this whole process gave me a huge amount of respect for actors and their craft and the huge potential of a strong performance, which is something I didn't really understand before. You know, everyone says a good performance is good and necessary, but you don't realize the power of a good performance until you're there in a theatre or in front of an actor who's able to give you everything that they have to give. So another lesson I learned from working in theatre is that it really forced me to simplify things, and it really forced me to strip everything down to its absolute essential. You know, when you're working with very little, every decision becomes a lot more obvious, but every decision also has the potential to be a lot more impactful. So when I was writing my film scripts in film school, there was a lot going on. They were hugely ambitious, different locations, casts coming and going, and you know, massive storylines that were just ballooning way too big and way too ambitious. But you know, when I moved into theatre and began producing this long form work, working in real spaces with real actors, it forced me to kind of wake up. And you know, if I was to add, for instance, a new cast member in just for one scene, I would still have to go through all the rigmarole of casting, auditions and picking someone. And then if they were just to appear in this in one scene, this one person, they'd still be sitting backstage, stuck there for the whole play. So that would be a very unsatisfying experience, to say the least, for everyone involved. And if you were to change locations, then you'd have to figure a way to get the cast off the main location they were in and into a new location, then try and put some dressing up there or find a way to tell the audience that we're in a new space. So there was a lot of challenges that I had to overcome in the writing, and I really did have to grow as a writer in a really positive way. So in terms of discipline, in order to learn filmmaking, I can't think of a better discipline than putting on a play. So theatre really forces you just to work really well with very few elements. Not while there's work to be done. Over an hour and a half, there was only 4 characters in one location. In Feck Off Crows, the second play, a little bit more ambitious, there was, I think, 5 characters in 2 locations over 2 hours. And that's an incredible discipline to be able to do that and to be able to think about that ahead of time. And that was, again, I keep on saying this, a huge learning curve for me. So in theatre, a scene has to work in real time. This is something we hugely focused on. After booking the venue and after doing our casting and getting our amazing actors, we spent up to 6 months upstairs in a pub in Dublin for both plays, the same pub, just rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing, working out different scenes, the pacing, the nuances of every scene. And by the end of it, you know, we really knew those scenes and we really had weeded out anything that wasn't working. And filmmaking doesn't go through this process for some reason. I don't know. You write the script and then you think magically everything's going to be perfect. This was a huge, I'm not going to say learning curve, but just a huge eye-opening experience for me. And working with the actors, having them collaborate and give their 2 cents on what was working and not working. This was honestly probably my favorite part of the whole process, the rehearsal period, and honestly made me a better writer, no question. And one of the most vital skills I learned during this period of very intense rehearsal, because it was very intense, we literally met a couple times a week, every week for 6 months before the play. But one of the most important aspects of it was that something that I didn't really know anything about was blocking. And if you don't know what blocking is, basically it's just how you move the actors around the stage or around the set in any particular scene. And blocking isn't something that you talk a lot about, again, in the world of filmmaking. I just find it interesting to contrast the two. You know, we're not always moving in life. Sometimes we are still, but sometimes I feel as a result, some films can feel too static, you know. So I like the movement, I like the rhythm, and this was a huge thing I got out of filmmaking. The way actors move around each other and the way you explore their relationship with each other in terms of how they move. Again, bringing up Touch of Evil, one of my favorite things. I really love this shot where the two characters are weaving around each other, and then you've got Charlie Heston in the background. I love this shot, and you can really obviously feel Orson Welles' theatre background in this shot as well. So moving your characters in theatre is kind of essential, and you have to do it. You have to fill up the space, and you have to give a sense of momentum and pace to the story. But with filmmaking, movement isn't quite encouraged in the same way, because every time you move your characters, depending obviously, you potentially have to relight another part of the set, you know what I mean? So very often you're just like, let's just keep the characters here, they don't need to go anywhere. But you know, I don't know whether it's my background in theatre or whatever, but you know, generally if I can move a character, I probably will. And you know, here's an example of in Gardener's Planet, where we had Aidan coming through the door, past Michael down the hallway, and we did go to a lot of trouble to try and light that up, because we had the exposure outside the door that we had measured for. So, you know, we had maybe closed down to f5.6 or f8 depending on the sun, and then when he came in we had to relight or expose for the sky, so get those lights really up in the corridor. But I like the movement, I like the energy that the move brings in, I like the humor that comes with the move as well, and I think it brings a bit of credibility and imagination to the scene as well. So there's no cutting away in theatre, you know, you can really work hard to get the audience involved in a meaningful way, and that's a fantastic you know, practice, and that's a really well spent amount of time. You know, I think now, especially as we enter the era of AI, having genuine emotional power in your film or in your work will be a kind of a currency. And you know, so yeah, it's a kind of currency. So in order to get that, to have some kind of meaningful period of rehearsal with your actors ahead of time is a great way of ensuring you get that very important emotional through line through your work. So yeah, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I've just gone into this briefly. There was so much more I could talk about in the plays, and I'm so grateful to everyone, you know, who came on board, all the actors and the theatre people who helped me as well, and things that I didn't know. You know, and what I took from it was so much that I was able to bring that into my next film, which I made the following year or the year after in 2015. I'm Talking to You, and if you haven't seen or heard of that film, there's some information about it here. So I took so much from that experience. It was a great experience of camaraderie as well. Do you know what I mean? It's maybe even more so than you get on a film set. It's you, the actors, and you're just in there in the mix. You're trying to make it work, and you're not worried about any of the camera stuff. So it was great. It was a very pure experience, really focused on the craft of getting every scene and every nuance right, and that's really something I learned from that, and I think my filmmaking is better as a result. So thank you so much for watching. I feel this video was pretty good. I feel I was a bit more articulate than I sometimes am, so thank you for watching and bearing with me. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe, and I'll be back with another video from the world of independent filmmaking or independent theatre making very soon.